Welcome to the Podcast Interview Marketing Show, where we explore big ideas with leading experts on how to grow your brand and business with targeted podcast interviews.
Today's big idea: should a podcast have video? That's almost like asking, should chili have beans? Well, you'll find people that have very strong opinions, but as a guest, you just show up and make the most out of the opportunity. See, today, 3 out of 4 podcasts include video, and Christina and Chloe are going to go through some of the differences, some of the benefits and trade-offs, and how you can be ready for your next interview if it's video.
Thanks, Tom. So I know that a lot of people like to view podcasts similar to a modern iteration of radio, but in more recent years, we've been seeing an uptick in podcasts utilizing video content. And Mars, I want to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you so much, Chloe. I am really excited to talk to you about video today. I too have seen the uptick in video as it pertains to podcasting, and I'm really excited about it. I think that just as with anything, we're going to continue to see the evolution of podcasts as they continue to grow. And I think that podcasting with video, the video component, I think one thing that we need to take a step back and consider within podcasting is first and foremost the loyalty of the listener of a podcast. A podcast host, their listener and their audience is very engaged, and having a video element only allows for more engagement and for you as a listener to a podcast to become that much more familiar and that much more, again, loyal to that podcast itself. So you can start picking up on more social cues. You know, when you listen audio only, you're hearing your host and you're getting to know some of their personality, but being able to see them, being able to say, like, you know, do they move their hands, noticing a little smile that they might give to the audience, those pieces are that much more engaging and thus going to give you that much more of a loyal listenership and thus a more engaged audience. So I'm really excited about the introduction of video and the uptick in video. I think it's only positive. That being said, audio-only podcasts are still very strong. They are still the most prominent form of podcast that we see out there. So while there is an uptick, it's still kind of a new realm of introducing video to the audio element.
That's so interesting, especially because, like I said, so many people think of it as radio, or at least I know I did for a long time before I learned more about podcasts. But I guess my question that I'm begging to ask is, if it has video, is it still technically a podcast? What makes that different from just a video on the internet?
You know, I think it's so interesting, Chloe. This question, I think, has been appearing about every year. I think every year we get a new question of, what is a podcast? There was a good amount of time where we tried to, as podcasters and people in the podcast industry, just have a good understanding and allow the public to know that, you know, this is a place, like you said, similar to radio. However, I think that the definition of a podcast is going to continue to expand. You're asking right now about video. Does video technically make it a podcast? If you look up what a podcast is, the current definition of a podcast is a program that is digitally uploaded and downloaded online. So a program is actually a pretty vague and vast word to consider. And something again, when we talk about is a video, what is a podcast? You know, is an audiobook a podcast? Is a video a podcast? So again, I think that one of the greatest things about podcasts is that they're not limiting. They are not confined to a strict box. When I used to work in radio, our programming was to the tens, as in every 10 minutes we had to hit those blocks and make sure the news was running and the traffic was running and had all of that set out. With podcasting, there are really no rules except have fun and do what you want to do with your podcast. So if that includes adding video, then yeah, it's a podcast. If it is, whatever else your creativity can bring to you, it's a podcast.
Okay, I love that. And obviously, I mean, I can gather just from what you've said so far that video is useful for audience engagement, so it's good for the host. But let's talk business, Mars. Let's say you were evaluating this whole idea of using video for podcasts through the lens of, let's say, like a marketer. What are your thoughts on that? Because it's all coming back to the money in the business, isn't it?
Yep, always has to come back to the money, Chloe. I'm glad that we're talking about this. Through podcast interview marketing, if that's something that you are excited about and that's something that you want to trial, getting on podcasts that have video should not be your main focus. However, I would definitely encourage people, if you have the opportunity to be on a podcast that does have video, take that opportunity. That is an opportunity for you to not only, again, we talked about some of this in the very early stages, the video component is going to make the audience that much more engaged, that much more loyal to the podcast. Now, if I'm a marketer, one of my main goals is to spread awareness, is to, again, get my product, my thoughts, whatever I am trying to sell or spread to the masses in front of engaged audiences that are targeted to, what my product or thoughts may be. A podcast that has a video component, those podcasts are more likely than not to be promoting their podcasts on different social channels in and of itself. And that is where I think the biggest benefit is coming from when you guest or when you have the opportunity to be on a video podcast, is really the repurposing of that content into micro content.
Ooh, what is micro content? I love a compound word. Let's hear about it.
Yeah. Let's dive in. Let's
Yeah,
do it.
come on.
So micro content is taking a piece of long form content, right? So we get you booked at Interview Valet to be on a podcast. This podcast may or may not have video. Let's say in this instance, it has video. What you can do is, now let's say you have this interview, it's 30 minutes. We could take 1-minute clips from that interview. And let's say we're taking really heavy hitter clips that just, they're a really nice sound bite. We could even just take 3, 4, 5 of those clips. And now not only are you promoting, and so what we can do, I'm getting ahead of myself. We take those 4 or 5 clips and we can chop them down, like I said, into 1-minute clips, 30-second clips, and then we can share those across social media. So you're not only just taking the link that you have from the podcast to say, hey, I wanted to share I was on this podcast. Here's the link where you can find and check it out and listen. What you're doing now is you're taking that content and you are putting it in front of the audience without them having to click on anything. So they can stay where they are and they see the video. And this leads into a concept that is a little bit larger, Chloe, called zero-click theory. I'm not sure if you want to dive into that a little bit.
I do want to hear about zero-click theory. Mars, you've mentioned it before. I think it sounds sort of like a cyber horror film, but I know it's something a lot more meaningful, especially if we're talking with video content. So I want to know your thoughts on that.
So they both tie hand in hand, really. So micro content, right? That is taking clips of the long form content that you have and slicing it into smaller pieces that are digestible in an instant, if you will. While you're scrolling on social media, you just have easy access to that. That's micro content. Now, micro content is very much so related to zero click theory, because what zero click theory, it's a very big idea, and I will spare you some of the, nuances of it all. But essentially what zero click theory is that when you are on social media, may that be LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, wherever you live, wherever your audience lives, they want you to stay on that website. So if you've ever been on LinkedIn, let's say, and you've tried to click a link, LinkedIn is going to ask you, are you sure you want to leave this page? They don't want you to leave the platform. They want you to stay on platform. So that also, knowing this about the platform, we can understand that when you create a post on that platform, what that platform is looking to do is prioritize posts that are going to keep the end user on the website or platform that much longer. So if I go ahead and I post a link to my podcast episode, that is not going to be as prioritized in the feed because it is going to take the end user off of the platform. Now, if we have a video, or even if we have an audiogram, if we have a piece of content. Now, again, we're saying our video, let's say, is 30 seconds to a minute. What that tells the algorithm on these platforms is, this post if somebody clicks play on this, they're actually going to be on our platform for about 30 seconds to a minute longer. So what that's going to do is have the algorithm prioritize your post over other posts. So really being able to utilize this micro content is not only going to get you, more views on your post when you go to promote it, but it's going to be prioritized in a way that the algorithm likes it as well.
So in terms of brand visibility, which if you're having video, of course, you're going to be more visible. So that's the spirit of this question. Does the visual element of the video podcast contribute to a more, I guess, let's say, robust online presence, something with a little more zest, a little more gusto? Are you more in the forefront in that sense?
Yes, and I love that question because it ties into what we were just talking about, Chloe, in that when you go on a podcast interview marketing campaign, when you really instill that into your marketing strategy, what you want to do is, again, we want to try to get in front of as many people as we can. And so the ability to be able to have this video element, which again, we've discussed, is that much more engaging, is that much more compelling to the end user, to be able to, let's say we're talking about a brand and a brand has, let's say that this is a beverage brand and you can see me talking about the brand and I tried it beforehand. I'm the host of a podcast. I tried this drink beforehand. If you can see me talking about it, that's much more compelling than even just hearing me talking about it. And then to be able to take these clips to repurpose them into micro content is you can add some of those images of your branding and maybe put a picture of the fizzy drink inside the video as well. There's so much more that you can then brand that content to then be evergreen content that you not only post once when the podcast goes live, but again, evergreen, as in this is a piece of content that you can use a year from now, 2 years from now. It is evergreen and thus allowing you to take this content and not only spread it once, but twice, 3 times, etc. Aside from that idea of the longevity of this is the fact that this content, this micro content, you can not only share it on your feeds, but again, when we talk about brand visibility, one of the biggest secrets in podcasting is that newsletters are key. Newsletters are where a lot of people are finding new podcasts. A lot of people are upskilling. They're very, very prevalent in the podcast community. And so if you can share those posts, those pieces of repurposed content, the micro content that we keep circling back to, if you could share those with newsletters, now you're getting even more people engaged with them. If you could share them with a traditional media outlet, let's just name drop like a BuzzFeed. If you could get your content on one of those, again, the visibility that you're going to have for your brand is that much more powerful.
Okay. I love your metaphor with the drink. It's like product placement, sort of. The video content is the proverbial Sunny D bottle on the kitchen counter behind the Malcolm in the Middle family. Okay, I love that. It's a very easy way to get that. So, okay, we're talking all these big ideas and how cool it could be and all this. Let's talk strategy.
Okay.
What kind of strategy could people implement to optimize this video content, especially across social media platforms?
So what we can be doing here, we talk strategy. Okay. We want to make sure that we grab the most compelling clips from the interview. You don't want to we need to be in the realm of social media. Okay. So when you as a marketer are getting prepared to, find the clips that make that really pop, think of yourself as somebody sitting on the couch. They have their iPhone or their Android in their hand. They are scrolling. That is the mindset that you need to be in when you pick the clips that you're going to pick to repurpose. We want to make sure that they start off with something engaging, something that really is captivating to pull the audience in. If there's a long-winded wind-up to what you're trying to say, that long-winded wind-up, we can probably let that go and just get right into the meat and potatoes of what is so compelling. Again, when we're looking at creating content, it needs to be something that captivates and grabs somebody's attention. I don't believe it's a true fact. I was misled for a while, but there is a sentiment that the human attention span is less than that of a goldfish at this point.
And that's 3 seconds, last I heard.
Yeah. So when you pick a clip, it should really be, I think about podcasts and I think about music in a very similar sense, Chloe. I love music just for what that's worth. And so I'm listening.
Yeah.
Yep. And so if the song doesn't captivate, if that song doesn't catch me within the first, 5, 10, 30. I guess music might have a little bit of a longer tail to it.
No, it's like that idea, that inside joke amongst a bunch of us that like I finally listened to that song that I always skip when I shuffle and it's amazing. It's exactly that. It's that attention span that we just don't seem to inherently have anymore.
Exactly.
Or
so
maybe ever did, but I'll say it anymore.
True. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But just keeping that in mind, I think that is one of the most important things strategy wise is to make sure that when you're looking for clips, you're looking for the really hot, buzz, crispy, spicy, whatever lingo we're using today. You really want to grab those captivating clips.
So let's go into that. What are some key factors that you think people should consider if they're going to be releasing this video content and how to do it best?
Well, what is your reason for getting on these podcasts? What is the campaign about? What are some of your key speaking points when you are on the podcast? I think that is going to give you a really great kind of framework in terms of what clips to be pulling from. When you're in your strategy session with your interview valet, client, account manager, what are you talking about? What are you telling them that you want to get across to the masses? Now, once you have that identified, those are the clips you need to be grabbing. However, like I said, make sure that if there is some big wind up to it, we can skip that and get right into the things that people love. Chloe, a study that recently came out showed that podcasters love data. And I think we know that, having worked in the podcast industry here at Interview Valet, we love data. But podcast listeners as well also love data. So if there's a stat that you have in the back of your back pocket, like for example, 54% of podcast listeners, they are more than open to purchasing a product that has been promoted on a podcast. So those things, stats, client consumer examples, right? If you have a case study, those are things that people are looking to hear. They want to see the benefit, they want to hear the benefit, and they want to learn. At the end of the day, I think that's a big thing that marketers first and foremost should keep in mind is podcasters come to listen to podcasts for not too many reasons. They usually come to learn or to have some form of entertainment. So if you can pull on those threads when you're looking to repurpose the content, I think you'll be set up in a really great place.
Okay, so then Mars, I guess, how would you mitigate? How do you find the balance between an authentic conversation and more of a very technical, this has obviously been scripted kind of a conversation? What's the proper balance there for video formatting?
Yeah, and I think that's something that you have to keep in mind with audio as well. But when it does come to video, I think the key elements there are to make sure that you come prepared, right? So when you do an audio podcast, you have the ability to kind of look off screen and maybe look at some of your notes. When you come to a video podcast, some things that you're going to want to keep in mind are being engaged with the camera, looking at the camera when you speak, not looking all around, coming with an outfit that you feel comfortable in. Podcasts, they run the gamut. And I also think that our clothing styles nowadays run the gamut as well. So I don't know that you have to come in a suit and tie or, a fancy gown or anything like that, but just coming with some level of professionals, knowing that you're going to be on camera.
At least slightly better than pajamas, we're asking.
Yeah,
for sure.
Just a step up.
Run a brush through the hair.
Yeah, exactly. So I think those are the biggest things to keep in mind when it comes to video, just knowing that, hey, there are going to be eyeballs on me. Let me do my best to physically present myself in the best way that I can, or as much as I feel comfortable.
So obviously, you know a lot about this. I'm wondering, can you personally share any experiences where participating in a video podcast significantly elevated your personal brand?
Chloe, I have been on a handful or so of podcasts myself, and anytime I have a podcast that has video, now, first and foremost, anytime I'm on a podcast, I share it. I am definitely one to promote the episode afterwards. I want to share that. It's, consider it to the host for having me on. I'm trying to grow my own brand, etc. So I always share my appearances on podcasts. What I have noticed is the engagement on the posts that have video, night and day, Chloe. When I just have a still photo or just a promotional GIF or something to that nature that says, hey, I was on this podcast, or I just put the link, I'm getting some engagement. But when I put a video clip out there, I'm not only getting likes, I'm getting comments, I'm getting DMs into my, my messenger.
That's sweet engagement we all want. Got it. Okay.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. So when it comes to the audience engagement, let's keep on the topic of engagement because that's kind of the bread and butter of the whole thing here, right? How can visuals play a role in establishing a connection between the host and the audience? More so, how does it go deeper than just providing a cute little video for your audience to watch? How does it go further than that?
Yeah, it goes further than that because I think that there are a few things to keep in mind when we talk about going further than that and audience engagement as well. When you initially started to ask that question, Chloe, one thing that came to mind for me is that, one of the biggest things, as you said, engagement is something that we are hyper aware of when we're talking about a podcast interview marketing campaign. A lot of the times we're getting questions about, hey, what's the return on investment? Podcast interview marketing is a little bit of a longer game. We have to, make sure that we give time for the podcast to be recorded, edited, and then scheduled and put out in a timely manner, however that fits the podcast needs. So when it comes to ROI and return on investment, as I said, it is a little bit of a long game. One way that we at Interview Valet try to help our users or our clients best track that return on investment is through helping set up welcome pages. And if you're not familiar with welcome pages, I definitely recommend checking out interviewvalet.com and looking into kind of what that is. But essentially, it's a landing page for anyone who has listened to the podcast to be able to find you and what you're talking about. Similarly, what we can do with the repurposed content is we can track engagement of those posts. So now we have some real-time assessment as well. Not only do we have the welcome page to say, hey, these people all came and they clicked through the welcome page, we can now track with your audience first and foremost, hey, did this land? Normally my posts get about this amount of engagement. Now that I've posted this, how did it do? How did it perform? If it didn't perform well, there's probably some insights there that we can learn from. If it performed even better, well, hey, that's great. But I think one of the biggest things to keep in mind is that we are always looking for points of stickiness, and having the video element to be able to repurpose and put out there in front of your audience is another way to tap into the podcast hosts audience that you have been engaging with. So not only are you posting this, but when you post it on your platform, you should also be tagging the host or the podcast that you have been on, or that podcast is with, or that clip is about. Because when you do that, there's a really large likelihood of symbiosis here, right? And what I mean by symbiosis is us benefiting from one another.
So let's go back to the marketer, the imaginary proverbial marketer that we're looking through the perspective of. Obviously, it sounds like landing pages are a great way for the marketer to measure the impact of the video content. What are some other ways besides just welcome pages or a landing page?
Yeah, I think though, first and foremost, you nailed it, Chloe. That is the very first thing that you should be doing. If you are not working with Interview Valet, you're trying to go it alone and do this yourself, that's something that you should look into. We have information about it on the website. And also, you'll hear more about welcome pages as you continue to listen to the podcast interview marketing show. However, yeah, tracking engagement on those posts is really important. I think that is a really great way. But the other things to keep in mind, I think when as a marketer, traditional marketer comes into the podcast landscape, it's not the same. There are definitely some things that are different when it comes to podcast interview marketing versus straight up traditional marketing. I also say this coming from a traditional media background in radio, terrestrial radio, and the way things move, the way things work are very, very different. And so I think that in the podcast space, there are more qualitative measures that we should be looking at for success versus quantitative. Now, those quantitative measures, again, those can be through tracking the social media engagement of the repurposed content. That can be through the welcome pages, seeing how many people are landing. If you put out promo codes, you have a product and you promote that promo code on the podcast, that's a really great way, again, to get another quantitative measure of how well these podcast interviews are performing for you. But there are a lot of qualitative measures that you can look to for success as well, such as, again, are you getting more comments? Have you gained more followers? Are you getting more interaction in your DMs? Are people just engaging with you more in general? These qualitative measures, are you getting more traction to your site? I guess that's a little bit more of a quantitative measure again. But there are many different. Yeah, it all counts. Yeah. And I think that when we talk about podcasts, we so frequently are looking to define that quantitative measure. And, people are driving when they're listening to podcasts. They might not click the link, or they're cleaning their house and they might not have time to use the promo code at that moment, or, things happen. I think looking at the qualitative measures are also really important.
Now, this is all fun. This is all good. We're praising. We're having a good time. But let's get a little more real. What are some more like some detriments or some pitfalls or mistakes? Even it doesn't have to be so dramatic as a pitfall. What are some mistakes marketers could make when they leverage video content?
Great question. I think that when we go back to some of the tips that we've given here, the reverse could be utilized in terms of recognizing mistakes that can happen. If you are not really familiar with repurposing content, take your time. Take your time repurposing that content because you want it to be quality content. If, again, you pull up the attention span, again, if we talk about that, about 3 seconds, not very long here. So what we're looking for is short clips. As a marketer, when you go to repurpose these content, you don't want to pull a 4-minute clip, a 5-minute clip. If you do, maybe that's something that you should put on YouTube versus putting on something like a LinkedIn, an Instagram, a TikTok, etc. For those platforms, you're really going to want to make sure that you keep it short, sweet, concise. Half a minute, minute and a half is kind of like,
pushing it. Maybe?
Yeah, we're pushing it.
Okay.
It should be really engaging if we're talking about like a minute and a half, 2 minutes. I wouldn't go any higher than that. So again, I think
back to that attention span that we're okay, for sure.
Yeah. So just making sure that again we pull really engaging clips, but making sure that again they're short, concise, they're sweet, and that I think again if we just take this and we put ourselves in that seat, remember you're trying to grab the attention of somebody who might be just sitting down scrolling. How are you going to do that? And I think that's the place that you're going to need to start from in order to be able to avoid those pitfalls.
Let's get into it. Let's say I want to do it. Every laptop has a webcam, although I would like to think maybe that's not the best avenue to go. What are some tools or some specific technologies that you would recommend for anyone interested in using video content? Because obviously, if we're talking about the qualitative and the quantitative measures for your success, quality is the opportune word there, is it not? And perhaps you
Yeah.
would want to focus on that. So what do you say?
I say that yes, every computer for the most part is equipped with a camera. I say for the most part that there are some computers that aren't, but I think nowadays most people have access to a webcam. If you really want to take your video to the next level, an external video camera is going to take your quality to the next level. You're not going to get 4K level quality when you're using just a standard, camera that comes with your computer. That being said, that's fine. That's all well and good. I think again, the biggest things to take away here are, in general, I have to say this as an audio engineer, it might not even be relevant to what we're talking about, but you need to have headphones.
Oh, it's all relevant. It's all relevant. We at Interview Valet are very, very big advocates of headphones.
Yeah, we need to have headphones. When we talk about quality, that is going to take you to the next level. I will spare you a rant, but the short of it is that sound waves bounce off walls, they bounce off ceilings, they bounce off chairs, they bounce. And so they're going to come back and create a headache for the producer who is trying to make you sound as good as you can sound. So I think making sure that you come prepared, again, having a certain level of attire, coming with headphones, and just making sure that, if video wise, if you want to take it to the next level, go ahead, buy yourself a fancier camera. Another piece of equipment that is utilized very frequently amongst podcasters is having one of those ring lights. That will also take you to the next level. And then I think lastly is be yourself, because when you're on video, no equipment necessary, you're going to see a little bit more of a real version of who I am than when you just listen, right? If you're just listening to this podcast, you're not seeing that I move my hands a lot when I talk. You're not seeing a little bit of the laughter here or some of, those key elements. So just come prepared, but be yourself. And, there's nothing better than seeing somebody be their authentic selves. And that is going to bring the even more engagement than, let's say, a 4K video camera.
For sure. Okay. And I love a ring light. I'm definitely using one right now. So I'm all for that. So let's go back to microcontent. That's my new favorite word. I just want to talk about it forever. Are hosts okay with others creating microcontent from their content? Or is that like a sacred, like you would never touch someone else's? What do you think about that?
Oh, such a good question. Such a good question here, Chloe. Because it's somebody else's work. You're then going to take it and do something with it. Is that okay? First and foremost, 9 times out of 10, yes. But that's something that you can, if you are willing to, what we do here, first and foremost at Interview Valet, is if you work with us, we will get this information up front. And we will know whether or not you are open to promoting the episodes. If you are open to promoting the episodes, that's something that we will have a conversation with the host about. First and foremost, you will have a one sheet that will have branded certification on it that says that you are certifiably like willing to promote the podcast interview. So that's first and foremost, have that conversation up front. I also want to say that actually might open more doors for you when you go to ask others, are you willing to have me on your podcast? Because being a podcast host is so much work, and creating a podcast, there's so much time that goes into it. So if you can let them know, hey, I'm really invested in this. I want to see this episode succeed just as much as you. I want to be able to create some micro content. I want to repurpose some of the content myself. Is that something that you're okay with? That is not only going to be very likely positively received. It's also going to, let's say you word it like this. Let's say, Chloe, you have a podcast I'd like to be on. And I say, hey, Chloe, I know that you've been talking about podcast interview marketing. That's something that I am so excited about. Here are some of my unique ideas on it. By the way, if you do want to go ahead with the episode, I have this many followers on social media. I'd love it if you would be okay with me, taking some of that content, repurposing it into some shorter length videos, and then having me share that on my social media. I'll tag you. As a podcast host, that might sound even more, you might even get your foot in the door.
It's like organic word of mouth marketing at that stage almost, wouldn't it be?
Yeah, it's like earned media. It's
Yeah.
like,
That's the smart one. There you go. Yeah.
no, I'm with you. We're on the same page right
Mhm.
here, because it's, again, it's like they're getting promotional outreach for free. So yeah, I think, to answer your question, Chloe, I think there's just a piece of etiquette that goes into it. I would ask before you just go ahead and do it. But yeah, more times than not, it's going to be very favorable in a response.
Okay. Now let's talk about etiquette, because you brought it up, and I do think in anything there's an unspoken, sometimes a loudly spoken etiquette. And for podcasting, especially with video podcasting, I know there's proper etiquette there. So what are some do's and don'ts of appearing on a video podcast, whether as a guest or a host?
As a guest or a host, I think that the etiquette should be the same as an audio interview. I don't think that there needs to be much of a difference in etiquette when it comes to whether or not you're on video or if you're on audio. Some things that you should just keep in mind is that, again, this is more times than not just a friendly conversation between two individuals. So it doesn't have to be that much deeper. Make sure that you are connecting. I think that's the biggest thing that we can talk about right now, is just making that connection with the host and having, again, an authentic conversation. If you come to the conversation and you're looking to, let's say with the video component, right? There could be some product placement, but let's not go too overboard with it. This is a podcast episode where we're looking to just engage with other individuals. So I wouldn't go overboard with it. I almost, kind of the word that comes to mind is, if you are going to use product placement, maybe don't be cheesy with it.
I think that is very succinct. I know exactly what you mean by that. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't be too overboard with it. But other than that, just come, like I said, as yourself, and be prepared to have an authentic conversation about what you're passionate about.
Yeah, that's that delicate balance between scripted and authentic that we're talking about. Okay.
Yeah.
So I hear you saying promoting and repurposing. Obviously, those words mean a lot to me. And hopefully, as the audience listens, they'll learn more too. But in terms of promoting and repurposing, what are some channels, and even, again, I'm going to say the S word, some strategies that anyone could use to maximize that video content?
Oof. Okay. This is another good question, Chloe. Okay. What social media channels should I be putting my content on? The answer to that question is there is no one channel that you should be putting it on. Where does your specific audience live? If you are finding that the majority of your audience is on Facebook, then go ahead and put all that content out on Facebook. The Facebook audience is not necessarily the same as the TikTok audience, right? There could be, we know that there are differences in demographics, psychographics, in terms of who is using which platform. Now, if you are on Instagram and you're also on TikTok, maybe there's a little bit of overlap there. The general answer to your question, though, Chloe, is, what social media outlets should I be using? The social media outlets that your audience uses. So if you know that your social media audience, or your client, your targeted consumer, they're not on TikTok, don't waste your time putting content on TikTok. If you know that they're not on Twitter, don't waste your time putting content on Twitter. It is time consuming. It takes a lot. Dial in to where your audience is and keep diving deeper into that specific channel. Maybe it's one channel, maybe it's two channels. Maybe you do have a really large audience that spans across multiple channels, and that's great. But again, I see so many people get involved in podcast interview marketing or just marketing in general, and they think, I need to be on TikTok, I need to be on Twitter, I need to be on social, I need to be everywhere. And you don't. The real answer here is, wherever your audience is, that is where you should put your content.
Well, and there's also nothing that says that if you're consistent with your repurposing on the social media platforms you're already on, you can't potentially then move to other platforms once your audience grows, right? Like,
Right.
You don't need to be on Twitter right now necessarily, because there's nothing that says you can't be on Twitter a year from now if your audience has expanded because of your effort with getting the word out there. Okay, that's probably really promising to people who are interested to know that you don't have to venture everything right at the beginning. It's more, again, it's a long game that you have to kind of build upon. Okay, I love that.
Don't overwhelm yourself,
Mhm.
right? Like if you're getting started, put your toe in and then really learn what you're doing in a space that you're comfortable doing it, and then you can expand.
Okay. So if video content is kind of the new frontier of podcasting, to put it dramatically, because I always will, where do we go from here? What do you think is the future after video content? What's next for podcasting? What do you think?
Oh my gosh, Chloe, if you know me, my mind goes all over the place. Like I'm ready for like the VR podcast. Like let's go.
That's kind of what I thought you were going to say, so I'm excited to hear even more. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know anybody that's doing it right now, but I'm excited to see it. But what I will say about video podcasts is, again, I think that we're still kind of in the early stages, as much as there are a lot of video podcasts. Also, I haven't said it this whole time, Chloe, but some people do refer to them as vodcasts.
Okay. I actually don't think I've heard that, and I work
So
here.
that's a little tidbit, but I do think we will see continue to see a rise in vodcasts, and I do think that again, one of the reasons for that is they are built in content treasure troves, and so one of the things that as a marketer, content, we know content is, I almost want to say, king at this point. It's we all are looking for, there's content creators, and it's just everybody is looking to put out content to engage with their audience. And so if you have a podcast that is an organic place of content that you can continue to pull from. So I think if you have audio and you have the capacity to just add in the video, you're going to be able to expand your visibility, your brand that much more by having those video elements to pull on in the promotional piece.
Well, Mars, I have just learned so much today. I really appreciate this. But before we go, could you please tell the audience where they could find you and where they can find even more information? Because I'm sure more people want to delve even deeper into the idea of video content. And I know there's so much out there that they could find. So where are you directing them for you and the information?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're looking to get in contact with me, you can find me. My name is spelled a little bit differently, so I will just say you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Cristina Marcello on LinkedIn, and from there, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a DM. The other way that you can best get in contact with me to learn more about what's going on in the realm of podcast interview marketing, and how we can help you here to leverage these podcast interview appearances, please just go to interviewvalet.com and you can find more about me and what I'm doing here with the team to help others on their podcast interview marketing journeys.
Well, thank you so much, Mars. I had a really great time. I've learned so much, and I can't wait for our next conversation.
Looking forward to it, Chloe. Thanks for having me.
That was one of the most complete discussions I've ever heard about using video podcasts as part of your podcast interview marketing campaign. Now, there's some extra resources that we'd like to give you. First is a checklist of different equipment, right? Everybody's got an opinion on what you need. And I tell you what, your buddy that is the musician or the person that works at the church in the AV department is probably going to have you spending way, way too much money. We've got a checklist of some of the best equipment that you can use out there. I also recently redid my home studio here and did a video behind the scenes to show you exactly what I had and then also what I upgraded to and how it's all connected together. So you can see that video back on the show notes at the podcast interview marketing. And finally, if you want to talk to us about how you could use video podcasts and all of that content that can be repurposed out of that to fuel your marketing engine, to be a content king or queen on podcast interviews there, we'll also put that back. Now, today's quote comes from the famous Fernando Lamas, also known as Billy Crystal. It is better to look good than to feel good, and you look marvelous.